Hi everyone, great to be with you for another community group video update summarizing our last week in Jonah chapter 4. Jonah 4 is the conclusion of this surprising book that just never seems to go the way you expect. Right from chapter 1 verse 2, after God says to Jonah, go to Nineveh, we see the twists, we see the turns, we see the surprises, verse after verse after verse. And here in chapter 4 is no different. Jonah is exceedingly angry at God. He's accusing God of being evil and unjust. It's not the first time someone has thought God is evil or unjust, and it certainly won't be the last, as I'm sure you know. But then Jonah sinks into self-pity. He sinks into this moaning of life, even wishing twice in the chapter that he was indeed dead, because he doesn't want to live or exist with a God who he thinks is unfair. Jonah's great knowledge of God comes to a head around verse 3 and 4 when he says, I know that you're merciful and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love. He's quoting Exodus 34 verse 6, the most famous description of God in the Old Testament. Over 20 times it's referenced. It's the way that the Old Testament authors describe God, and Jonah doesn't describe God positively, but he says, these things, God, are the very reason why I'm angry with you. And so he insults God. He throws God's character bio back in his face in the first few verses. Jonah is angry, fuming. Interesting that I think it's verse 2, verse 1, it says Jonah was exceedingly angry. But the Hebrew is far more powerful. He's violently angry. He's convulsing with anger, seething, in fact. Why is he so angry? Because he says that God has relented. He didn't think Nineveh deserved to be spared. Recall as well that we finally get the answer for why Jonah ran. A lot of commentators I've read this last few weeks have said Jonah ran because he was afraid. And it's simply not true. I don't want to undermine the fact that Nineveh was violent, evil, and that there would have been fear, I'm sure, on Jonah to think, I'm going to this place. But that wasn't the reason why he ran. The reason why he ran was that he knew God would have mercy. He didn't think that these people deserved God's mercy. He's essentially a racist. Not so much in the modern way of thinking, but he didn't see this people group, Imago Dei, made in the image of God, deserving of God's mercy. Jonah was grumpy about that and has a pity party. Interesting to explore then, what's God's nature and character like? And how does God show mercy to Jonah in this chapter? Because we see God's generous, patient, kind reply, which is questioning Jonah. And twice, in fact, he questions Jonah and says, do you have a right to be angry? He then sends a plant, as you'll see, and with this great incident where Jonah experiences this grace from a plant, from creation, that God has made. Then a worm comes that God appoints and eats it. Notice again the repeated phrase that God provided, God provided, God provided. Notice how Jonah is exceedingly happy about the plant, and contrast that with his attitude for how he hated and despised Nineveh. He's more happy about a plant that's here and then gone than about 120,000 people. That's about the population of Port Adelaide Enfield Council area. He's happy about that plant for one day than these people in total darkness that God says don't know their left or their right hand. They don't know right or wrong. They don't know God. They don't know how to be saved, or that what they're doing is evil, in fact. Notice as well God's intense description at the end to Jonah. It's not rhetorical, by the way. It ends with a question, but God's actually answering Jonah's question in chapter 4, verse 2, with a question of his own. And he's saying, Jonah, should I not have concern and compassion? And the answer is yes, because Jonah says in chapter 4, verse 2, God, you are showing that and it's unjust. And God's trying to illustrate through the plant that actually I do have mercy. I am compassionate. Jonah, I'm compassionate to you. Look how gentle and kind I've been at replying to your hard pity party heart, your moping, your sorrow, your self-religious righteousness right there. God's just been addressing it through creation speaking again, as is the theme through all of Jonah. God uses creation to talk to him and then backs it up with his own voice explaining why. But also that God is just gentle and kind. So there is a compassionate God presented to us in Jonah chapter 4, tying all the threads together. And it's left with the crux of the story isn't saying, look how bad Jonah is. It's God's asking us in this narrative, because Jonah doesn't give an answer, for us to say, wow, am I like that? Is there a pocket in my life when I'm not showing mercy? Am I part of a church? Do I have a view of God, a theology of God? Because Jonah was right about God so much, but wrong so much too. Do I have a theology about God that doesn't care about God's mercy? Isn't missional, isn't outward looking? Because God is far more missional, far more filled with mercy than his people. So if you kick around Jonah 4, look for the threads, look for some of the repeated words God provided, look at Jonah's attitude, look at how it ends, and reflect on how and why Jonah asks us to use it as a mirror into our own heart and minds. That our theology might be so right, yet also it could be so wrong at the same time, because theology of the living God must have living consequences. It must cause mercy and grace, compassion, change in us, else it's a bad theology. Nothing wrong with what Jonah says about God, he just doesn't like it. So the God is true and right, but also the problem exists sometimes with us, that we don't translate that into mercy and compassion to others. So anyway, kick it around. Great to finish Jonah. Spend some time praying that God would show mercy to you, to those around you who don't yet know the kindness of Jesus Christ. Have a great week.